This is Robert Marglace, the Mindshare Learning Report, Canada's Learning and Technology e-magazine. Happy Monday and welcome to this week in Canadian EdTech MindShareTV podcast in conversation with global EdTech legend George DeBakey on international trends and opportunities in K-12 education and beyond. Thank you for joining me this afternoon. This on a holiday of sorts for you in the U.S., George.
That's right.
Is it Martin Luther?
Yeah, Martin Luther King Day. So a lot of things are closed: government, banks, businesses. Yep.
So we try to stay on top of your holidays and history up here in Canada. I'm not sure it happens in the same way down in the U.S., but you're just a little bit bigger than we are, so we always try to pay attention. But a little bit about George DeBakey. He's the president of DeBakey international consultant for advancing global EDU education consulting firm. He's been involved in international business for 40 plus years in the private and public sector. He assists educational firms to expand and develop their business in the Middle East and other regions. Major focus in education sector includes K-12, mainly international schools in the Middle East and universities. He's involved in areas of Arabic language products, educational technology, languages, ebooks, reading and literacy, science, math, STEM education. He's worked with firms from the US, UK, Australia, Estonia. You need to get Canada in there.
I do have Canada. Don't I have Canada in there?
No, and the Middle East.
Well, that's I do have a client right now. I'm helping from Canada.
Yes, of course. So
my apologies.
No worries. Talk to me about how you, first of all, kudos to you for your leadership in this space, and that spans 4+ decades. How did you get into the learning technology space to begin with?
Well, it was kind of by honest. I degree in international business many years ago. Started working with Rockwell International, which was not really an education company, many years ago, and lived in London and Cairo, developing business for them, mainly in the telecommunications electronics area, even though I'm not an engineer. But I always had kind of a bug with the Middle East because of my family background. And living in Cairo many years ago, I always had an interest in education, got involved with, when I came back to the States, doing some adjunct teaching at Georgetown and University of Maryland, and was approached to start some courses for AT&T on international business. And the company hired me that I did that for, and got involved in project management overseas and selling in Europe mainly. And then as the Middle East started to explode more in the East, and so I got involved that way, is kind of gravitated into that and have enjoyed it ever since.
Amazing. Talk to me about some of the countries that are on your radar that are opportunistic, in need of great resources and technology. And I love the notion of, that you were passionate about education. I think most of us that are in the space are here because we want to make an impact. It's not all about money. And hence, there are many leaders that we know that have been in it for many decades, including myself.
Yeah, well, I focus a lot on the international school market because that's become a good market. A lot of people companies don't realize the growth of that area. And one of my values is understanding the market and culture. And you've got now over 13,000 international schools. Wow. being defined as schools in a country where English is not the native language. So that's to grow, according to ISC, to probably over 19,000 in the next 5-6 years. And the top countries are China and India, which you'd probably expect. But interesting enough, United Arab Emirates is third, even though it's only got a population of about 8 million. It's a very advanced country. People like to live there. Schools are good. They have over 800 international schools in the UAE. And
wow. That's huge.
So I focus efforts on that, and they've got curriculum, British, American, International Baccalaureate, Canadian, and others. In India, because there's a lot of Indians that have moved and live in Dubai, in the UAE. And so there's a lot of schools with Indian curriculum. So many companies wouldn't realize the different curriculums that are out there. Now, maybe your product or service is focused on a certain curriculum, or it may be not dependent on a certain curriculum. So those are kind of the top countries. But you can go around Latin America, Middle East, Europe, Asia, where there's international schools in all those countries, and a lot of growth in the Middle East and Asia, where companies should be looking at opportunities there.
Talk to me about some of the key conferences that you will attend. I know you're twisting my arm to come to the UAE at some point. There's a WISE conference and there's an EdTech conference as well that you don't miss?
Yeah, well, the WISE conference where the World Cup was every year. It's been on for a number of years, sponsored by the Qatar Foundation, and that is a very high-level education forum that usually has taken place in November. You have to get invited to attend. The one that I tend to go to every year is called the Guest Conference, capital GESS. It used to be in March. They've now moved it to November. So I've been there the last 2 years after somewhat post-pandemic. And I was just there in November for a week at the conference, and about 4,000 attendees, probably 200 exhibitors. It's mainly Middle East focused, so it's a nice niche. A good place to meet companies, what the competition's doing, and schools there, and get on the program. Many of my companies, I get on the program to speak and network and visit schools.
That's a great strategy.
You've also got niche regional groups like BSME, the British Schools in the Middle East, has an annual conference. Obviously, the schools that attend that are mainly British curriculum schools. I usually go to the NISA conference, which is for the Middle East, but mainly American curriculum schools. May have 500 attendees, maybe 20, 30 exhibitors, but it's the really focused. It's focused because the attendees are decision makers, heads of the schools, and curriculum directors. And then the International Baccalaureate has a Middle East, Europe, Africa one. So those are just a few. And then there's the large BET conference in London every year, which I'll be going to this year. They moved it to March for some reason. They'll be back in January, I think, next year, but they were in March this past year. And well, good. I'll see you there. I'll be there again. I've been there many times. So it's probably the most international. It's even larger than ISTE. Maybe 800 exhibitors, 30,000 delegates. So which makes that officially the largest EdTech conference in the world, unless you know of one in India that I'm not aware of. No, not yet. They do have a number of ones there, and you get a lot of the high-level ministers that will attend the BET for some workshops, and then go around the conference and the exhibit area. Here's a challenge for you to help, kind of add clarity to. Oftentimes you'll have a company that's a startup, and they haven't really won their backyard, meaning their own region, state, or province if it's Canada, and they have this pent-up demand to go test the waters in the US or internationally for that matter. And ironically, some of the companies that I know end up discovering that it's important to win the foreign country first. It's like not unlike actors, Canadian actors, singers, comedians, right? That have to go gain respect somewhere else, validate their talent or skill, just like the unicorn paper learning thrived in the US first before they haven't officially. I think they won the Toronto District School Board contract recently, but other than that, they hadn't done much business at all in Canada. So talk to me about how you help companies gauge whether they're ready or not.
to?
Yeah, well, that's a timely question. I mean, over the many years, I have worked with, well, typically with very small, medium-sized EdTech firms. I actually have a client right now from the U.S. where, parallel to the U.S. market, I met them at ISTE actually. They not only are marketing and developing the U.S. market, at the same time, they hired me to help them in the Middle East, believe it or not. And I'm helping them some other countries. But we're doing a number of strategies where I'm introducing them to schools, doing webinars, using the ISC database for email campaigns, developing leads. We're getting some very good traction right now.
Excellent.
And you have to be a little patient. You know, it doesn't happen overnight. But in the 4 months so far, I'm optimistic that probably within the next month or two, we'll probably even have some contracts in the Middle East. We're also working with some large school operators, that possibilities there, who own large number of schools in the Middle East. So I think the key point here is, if you're going to get involved, you got to be committed at the top. Even if you don't have a lot of financial resources, there are things we can do. And I think you really got, I've seen companies make mistakes in hiring maybe someone right out of school and think they can go and be successful. You really got to hire somebody that knows the market, knows the education, and then this is true anywhere, obviously, and can help you right away start developing some strategies, getting involved, trade shows, whatever it may be that you would do even in the U.S., or find resellers. I work with a number of very good resellers, and in different countries. And so it's similar strategies, but you need somebody that really understands the marketplace.
Absolutely. And on top of that, there are opportunities to leverage some of the resources, like in the case of a Canadian company going to the U.S., the Canadian Trade Commission office in many of the parts of the U.S. Are very supportive, and you can get funding to offset your expenses. So talk to me a little bit about what that looks like in other parts of the world for U.S. companies or Canadian companies for them.
Yeah, well, I think the U.S. and Canada both have similar things. I mean, I know I've encouraged companies from the U.S. side, depending on what state they're in, their state government has brought an international trade department, and they will usually fund half of your expenses overseas for a trade show or something. And so I've had companies that, like state of Virginia, we're looking into state of New York right now for a company where they've got funding available. And a lot of times they have a hard time giving this money away. And it's usually focused on smaller firms. So that is definitely one of the avenues that I think, and I know up in Canada the same thing. They should look in opportunities in their province or with the government there. I've worked with some of the Canadian consulate groups overseas. They're very good. And so, yeah, I definitely, I think that was the main question there. Was there some other part of that question? Did I overlook something? I'm sorry.
No, you're doing great. I would be remiss if I didn't ask the question or broach the subject of EdTech trends for 2023. We just released our top 10, and let's go down that path a little bit about what products and services, tools are in vogue that you see on the international scene, as we've highlighted some in our top 10, like anything related to well-being. Um, that's a big one that we're seeing these days. How is it resonating?
I'm sorry, I lost you. I lost you for a minute there. What?
No worries. Well, well-being and active learning is an area. Yeah.
Well, yes. I mean, I think a lot of the product solutions that schools overseas, I know in the Middle East particularly, STEM, many of their schools, international schools, are developing STEM labs, getting donations from schools. AI is very popular. Robotics is very, is very timely right now. The languages, particularly learning English as a second language, Professional development. I always encourage companies that professional
Right.
development is extremely important, and even more so, at least in the Middle East and other countries overseas, where many of the teachers may be Westerners, but there are many others that may not be. And so schools like webinars, or you come to their schools if possible, and give professional development. And when you sell a product, I always tell them, do not forget professional development, because if you want to get a renewal, you've really got to do a good job of training, whether it's from the States or Canada. But a lot of companies will hire somebody locally and train them to go out and visit schools as they build up their business. Coding is a very big one. Esports. I've gotten involved in esports. Yeah. I didn't realize until about a year ago, until I got into this, how big a real business this is. Middle East, Saudi Arabia claims that, and this has been in writing, that by 2020, they plan to be the largest esports. They want to be the world's leader in esports. And
well, I think it's bigger than the movie business. The whole gaming industry is bigger than the movie industry, which is crazy.
Gaming, very big. I was at a couple.
Yeah,
well, I've been at a couple schools in UAE where I went out and saw their esports design game facilities, if you will.
Fantastic. What about cybersecurity?
Oh yeah, cybersecurity is a big issue. Is a bigger issue. In fact, at most of the conferences that one attends out there, there's usually a half a day devoted out of 3 days to cybersecurity speakers, if you will, companies that are exhibiting. So that's become more of a sensitive item, and particularly the international schools.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, our AI and chat GPT is also very much top of mind these days. Is it hit the radar of international business as well?
Oh yeah, you're talking about AI? Yes.
Yeah.
And if there's some groups I know that in the UAE, Abu Dhabi in particular, they have launched a lot of programs to be a leader in AI and funding. Sources, investments. So if you're looking for investments, there's a number of groups in the UAE that are looking for plans to fund outside of the country if the products fit certain categories. So I wouldn't overlook funding sources from the Middle East. And I work in many of the countries, Qatar, Kuwait, some of these other markets are also very good. They're international schools.
Talk to me about cloud computing, digital transformation, dashboards, interoperability around some of these tools. How important is that?
Yeah, well, I'd say over the last few years, obviously social emotional is a hot topic, and cloud computing, there's an organization that is focusing totally on that. That's been a good friend of mine from the UAE embassy here, moved back to Abu Dhabi, and he's now running that. Interoperability is a key area, like it is everywhere, if you will. So I think people would find that the technology is, is up to date. Maybe they'll even be more advanced. They've even set up a space center. They sent up 2 astronauts a couple of years ago. It's now become kind of the Arab Center for space.
Wow.
They sent up a rocket 2 years ago before the U.S. and China did to Mars. So they've invested a lot of money in human resources and financial area. Healthcare in the Middle East are the 2 top priorities, and particularly in the UAE, the Cleveland Clinic a few years ago set up a whole new beautiful hospital in Abu Dhabi. New York University, NYU has the campus now. A lot of overseas, British, American, Australian, Canadian, etc.
My sister actually taught in Abu Dhabi for 5 years, so I'm quite familiar with some of the work and innovations and investments that they made in a big way in the airport and in other venues and facilities. They've put their stake in the ground to be global leaders, which really certainly creates opportunities because, as you alluded to, learning is a is a high priority because a smart city, a country is a thriving community, right? That's, the smart cities are the ones that do well, and people have a better quality of life. So that's what we're all trying to accomplish, I presume. Well, in closing, are there any tools that you're excited about that you've seen along the way in the recent months that are gaining traction, and looking forward to seeing you at FETC as well?
Yeah, that's coming up. Well, a week from today, be going down there. Well, I think again, it gets back to I've seen more emphasis on professional development, social emotional learning, special needs, if you will. In the UAE, they call special needs people of determination, and their rationale is we all are people of determination, and so I think a lot of product areas. I think the thing is they like to be aware of what new products are out there that they may not be aware of. I usually try to introduce some of the clients I work with, their products that I think are very good, and maybe new technology that schools want to look at, particularly new technology that for teaching, lesson plans, things like that. Before we end here, one little thing I like to always mention is the UAE a few years ago appointed a minister of happiness. And
Wow.
So if you want to be happy, there's a happiness street. And so I've always found that interesting. And I think too, you will find the only reason I emphasize UAE, I usually start there because, like I mentioned earlier, over 800 international schools.
Wow.
You need to understand sometimes the operators who put those schools up, you usually don't get involved in that unless your business is setting up schools and the issues you got to work with and approvals. But if you're just selling products, then that's a different issue. There's usually not many restrictions.
Right.
And if you have a reseller or somebody that, if you need that, then that can be helpful. Some companies don't need that. And
so I'm thinking we should plan for a North American trade mission, that we bring a few companies and interested education leaders and choose one of the conferences and plan well ahead. I think that would be really quite fascinating. Before we wrap up, Lynn Nolan had a question about companies that EdTech companies that are focused on classroom and school integration with content. Are there any related to that, or the trends around? Do you see any trends around the future for the future of educational technology specific to the regions you're talking about? How do they compare in contrast to where we're at in North America? I guess would be interesting.
Well, it depends on the school. I mean, again, it's the international school. They have money. Many of these schools have maybe 60 nationalities. I mean, I will see, the schools have bought one-to-one iPads for students way ahead of us. So they're really not behind. Now, yes, they're always looking for new things. Mentioned content management. That question came up recently, trying to find some companies that are around. I know this is a new area or hot area, I guess, around content management and companies that are doing that. So
LMS systems, online learning.
Well, LMS and SIS. I mean, a lot of the heads of schools tell me, they're tired. They're siloed. They've bought so many systems over the last 10 years that investments they've made. They're looking for the company that can come up with integrating all those things into one system, and it saves money. Then they would probably change their system. If it doesn't really do that, they don't really want to waste the investment they've made. And so yes, I've worked with a company out of Australia and the UK that been working on helping them with LMS and SIS. So yes, that's a good area. It doesn't have to be that the Lynn Nolan that's on there is somebody I knew a number of years ago. Is it from the South?
I could very well be. I think you're right.
I knew,
And,
and I think
yeah,
Lynn
you know,
Nolan is
you know, when she saw EdTech Legend, I guess it piqued her interest, and she didn't want to miss this MindShareTV podcast. George, with that, I want to thank you for your time this afternoon. Grateful of your insights and love your passion for making an impact, and kudos to you for 4 decades plus in counting. You're not
one
ready
last.
to sail into the sunset yet.
No. I still enjoy going out there. I usually go out to the Middle East 3-4 times a year, and I'll be going again next month. One last thing, I like your idea about a North American trade mission. You know what's nice about that?
Yeah.
The World Cup in 4 years will be in North America, Canada, U.S., and Mexico.
Yeah.
So I've been doing some esports around that. So
Well, let's plan for an esports international trade mission and competition. That'd be a lot of fun, and perhaps have it in one of the stadiums where they held the World Cup soccer. That'd be pretty cool. With that, George, love your growth mindset. See you at FETC at our Can-Am event. For those of you attending FETC, we're hosting our 25th Can-Am EdTech Celebration of Excellence meetup on January 25th at 5:30 p.m. at the Convention Center Terrace. So that was George DeBakey, President DeBakey international consultant for advancing global education consulting firm. My name is Robert Merdolacci, the Mindshare Learning Report. Be sure to check out www.mindshare.learning to get your latest issue. And until next time, stay healthy, stay safe, and keep the learning curve steep.